This morning, I woke up alone. I put the coffee on to heat up alone, and I sat in this chair that I've been occupying for decades to wait for someone to arrive and ask me the question that nobody in 106 years of life has ever bothered to truly ask me. My name is Arthur. I am 106 years old. I was a bricklayer for 41 years in this very same city where I was born, where I got married, where I learned how to lose the people you love without letting it break you completely, even though sometimes it tries with a lot of insistence. I have 4 kids, 9 grandkids, and 3 great-grandkids who don't really know what to do with me, with a great-grandfather who still wins at cards, who remembers things they haven't lived through, and that, if they're truly lucky, they'll never have to live through. My wife Ruth passed away 11 years ago. The doctor who warned me at 57 that my heart would put me in the ground before I hit 75 has been gone for 14. Construction buddies who had years on me checked out way before I did. Lifelong friends, lifelong enemies too, because I had them, and I don't regret having them because they gave the world a certain texture it just doesn't have without them. Even Ruth's brother-in-law, who was healthy as an ox and bragged about it at every family gathering, dropped at 82 without anyone seeing it coming. And I'm still here in this chair with my 6 a.m. coffee and the geraniums on the balcony that Ruth planted 40 years ago, which I keep watering every 2 days because I don't know what else to do with them. I know what you want to know. Everybody wants the exact same thing when they find out how old I am. The first thing they ask, without exception, from the very first reporter who came to interview me to the latest neighbor who finds out at the grocery store, it's always the same. What do you eat? How much do you sleep? Do you walk every day? Do you take any supplements? Do you avoid alcohol, sugar, fats? Do you pray? Do you meditate? They ask for the list like longevity is some kind of cookbook recipe, and I've got the ingredients jotted down on a piece of paper that you just have to copy and follow to the letter. I give them the list because it exists, and it's honest, and I don't like lying at this stage of the game. But if I just left you with the list, I'd be deceiving you in the worst possible way, which is by telling a half-truth. Here's the list. Eggs in the morning, usually scrambled with a little bit of good oil, not that cheap jug stuff that tastes like nothing. Meat 2 or 3 times a week. Real meat, the kind that has flavor and substance, not those thin slices wrapped in plastic that look more like a lab experiment than food. Seasonal vegetables, which are the only ones that make sense to eat because they actually remember what they're supposed to be. Beans. Dense bread, not that spongy stuff that falls apart when you touch it and tastes like wet cardboard. Water. Black coffee, no sugar, twice a day. And yeah, a glass of wine with Sunday dinner because Ruth used to make pot roast on Sundays, and a pot roast without a glass of wine next to it is a tragedy that no Sunday deserves. No pills, no supplements. None of those bottles with massive promises printed in tiny letters that they sell you at the pharmacy, looking like they just discovered something humanity has been hunting for centuries. I've also never denied myself a slice of cake at a birthday party, or a piece of smoked sausage at Christmas, or a couple of cookies before bed when I felt like it. The ones who turned eating into a religion of guilt and penance, the ones who lived terrified of every bite, the ones who punished themselves for every little slip from the plan. Almost all of them suffered a whole lot more than they lived. And that, in my 106 years of experience watching how people operate, wears you down faster than any bad food. But listen to me closely right now, because what I'm about to tell you next is the most important thing I have to say to you today. If you think the list I just gave you is the secret, you've understood me entirely backward. There was a guy in my neighborhood named Gordon, a retired doctor, a smart and well-read man who had dedicated his entire life to understanding how the human body works from the inside. His whole life revolved around his annual lab results, his blood levels, his percentages of everything: cholesterol, blood pressure, triglycerides, kidneys, liver. When you asked him how he was doing, he'd answer with numbers. He kept a notebook where he wrote down every single day what he ate, how far he walked, how many hours he slept, what the doctor told him at his last checkup. 20 years keeping that notebook. 20 years staring at numbers instead of looking at the day right in front of him. He checked out at 79. His wife Dolores told me at the funeral, with that raw honesty that sometimes only comes out in moments of grief when you have no energy left for beating around the bush, that he had spent his last 12 years living in fear. Constant fear. Fear that the numbers would change, fear that something would fail, fear that his body would betray all the care he had poured into it. Fear of dying. She told me he had spent a whole decade preparing himself not to die, instead of actually doing something with the time he had. I walked back home thinking about that, and on the way I asked myself a question that has occupied a lot of real estate in my head ever since. Have that been living, or had that simply been not dying yet? Because there is a difference. A massive difference. And over the years, that difference has become the most important thing I've figured out about why some of us make it this far and others don't. When I retired at 69, it didn't take me long to realize that retirement can kill you faster than any disease if you don't know what to do with it. 41 years getting up before dawn. 41 years with something waiting for me every morning, even if that something was just a half-finished job site on the next street over, a framing wall to put up, a crew waiting for me to show up so they could start. 41 years where the day had a shape right from the jump, and then suddenly nothing. They handed me a plaque at the farewell dinner. My buddies clapped for me. They told me I could finally rest, that I had earned it, that it was my time. I sat down to rest, and it damn near killed me. Not from any sickness, but from the sheer emptiness of it. It was Ruth who called it out, because Ruth was like that. Direct as a steel beam, no frills, no unnecessary detours. She said it to me one morning in January without raising her voice while I was sitting in this exact chair staring at the wall for no particular reason. She said, "Arthur, you've been in that chair for 4 months, and you're starting to look like a piece of furniture. Go out and do something, man. You're still breathing." Just like that. Exactly like that, without adding another word because she didn't need to. I got annoyed the way I always got annoyed when she was right, which was almost always. But I held on to what she said and started turning it over in my head. The body notices when it no longer has anywhere to go. I can't explain it with medical terms because I'm not a doctor, but I've seen it too many times to ignore it. When the body senses that there's nothing waiting for it tomorrow, it starts preparing to go nowhere, as if it were saying, well, if we're done with all this, let's start shutting down. No rush, but let's shut the lights off. I saw it in Ruth's brother, Sam. He was a strong guy, the kind who worked with his hands his whole life and carried that solid build you only get from physical labor. He retired in May in perfect health, and by October he was in the hospital, without the doctors finding anything specific to completely justify it. He had simply switched off inside. He had run out of reasons to get up early, and his body had taken note of that with a precision no machine could ever match. I was saved by the balcony. One day, I don't know exactly when because those first few months of retirement blurred together in my memory like one long afternoon, I walked out onto the balcony without any real plan and noticed the geraniums hadn't been watered. I watered them. I noticed the dirt in the pots was dry and packed hard. I loosened it up. I saw that one of the plants was leaning a bit, and I straightened it out. By the time I realized what was happening, it was 2 in the afternoon. I had been out there since 9 in the morning. My hands were stained with dirt. My lower back ached a little from bending over the pots. I was hungrier than I had been in weeks. It was the first time in 4 months that I felt like the day had actually been good for something. Ruth was standing in the kitchen doorway when I walked back inside. She didn't say a word, she just looked at me. But I knew that look after so many years together. It was the look of someone who has been waiting not for an hour or a week, but for a long time. and finally sees what they were waiting for arrive. From that day on, the balcony was mine, in a way it hadn't been before. Before, it was just a corner of the house where things grew that Ruth took care of. Afterward, it became the place where I had work to do every morning. That difference, even if it sounds small when you say it out loud, changed everything. With the balcony came other things, the way it usually happens when a person starts moving again. The morning walk came along, which at first was just down to the corner bakery, and over the years got longer and then shorter again, depending on what my legs would allow, but it was always there. Then came the Thursday card games with Leo and Frank, neither of whom are around anymore, and I still miss them both. But for years they gave me more life than any vitamin I could have swallowed. Then came the habit of putting on a record after dinner, which Ruth had always wanted to do, and I had always put off because I'd come home exhausted from the job site, and later just because I never found the right time. Then came the habit of sitting right in this chair at 4 p.m. just to watch the light hit that window. It always comes in exactly the same way, at the exact same angle, with that golden color you only get from the winter sun at that specific hour. It is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my entire life, even if it doesn't sound like much. Small things. Things that might seem ridiculous or meaningless to a 40-year-old, but they were reasons. They were motives to ensure that tomorrow wasn't just another day where I hadn't died yet, but a day where I had something to do, something to look forward to, something that needed me even just a little bit. And that difference, I insist, is the most vital one I have found in 106 years of living. And I never get tired of repeating it because I think it's the thing people talk about the least and the thing they need to hear the most. I have seen people check out while in perfect physical condition. I've seen people go who did everything right, who ate exactly what they were supposed to, who slept their precise 8 hours, who followed every instruction from every specialist with all the discipline in the world. And I have seen people stick around far longer than expected who, in the eyes of any doctor, had absolutely no right to still be breathing. The difference, the only constant difference I've been able to track over the decades, wasn't in what they ate or how they slept. It was whether they had something to look forward to tomorrow morning. It doesn't have to be big or important. It doesn't have to change the world. Just something that pulls you forward when you open your eyes. A plant to water, a phone call to make, a game to play. The light hitting a window at a specific hour. Something concrete, something yours. Something that exists because you exist. Now comes the part I've struggled the most to be willing to tell. The part that took me the longest to find the words to say out loud. When Ruth passed, I was 95 years old, and I know exactly what you're thinking. At 95, a man should have already made his peace with the idea of losing. He should have already learned how to let go. He should have stacked up enough experience with grief to know how to handle himself. Well, no. Take it from me, a guy who's been on this earth for 106 years and has lost more people than most folks even meet in a lifetime. Nobody is ready for the person they've slept next to for 58 years to just vanish. Nobody. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how many losses you've waded through before. Every single one has a piece of the first one in it. The morning after the funeral, I woke up at 6 o'clock sharp out of pure habit, because the body doesn't understand mourning. It just keeps doing what it's always done. I went to the kitchen. I put 2 mugs on the table. I did it without thinking the way I had been doing it for decades, a gesture so automatic it didn't even pass through my brain. It just happened. When I sat down and looked at those 2 mugs, I froze. One for me, one for nobody. I sat there for an amount of time I couldn't measure. The light shifted across the kitchen, which is just what light does in the morning, completely indifferent to whatever is happening underneath it. And I just kept sitting there, staring at that mug that was getting cold and that nobody was ever going to empty. I drank mine, but I couldn't bring myself to throw hers down the sink. I left it right where it was, in the exact same spot it had been every morning for decades, and I just sat with it in silence. I don't know how much time went by. I know that by the time I plugged back into the world, the kitchen had a different light, and I was still breathing. The morning hadn't waited for me. The hours had kept moving without asking for my permission, just like they always do, just like they always have. At some point, without making any conscious decision about it, I stood up. Not because I wanted to, not because some comforting thought had floated into my head, not because I had found the meaning in any of it. I stood up because the geraniums on the balcony still hadn't been watered, and that was a concrete thing I could do. A small, specific thing that was waiting for me out there. I walked out to the balcony. I watered them. I pinched off a couple of dead leaves that hadn't done anything wrong, but they were there and they needed to be removed. I went back into the kitchen. I called my son Charlie, who lives in Memphis. Not because I had anything important to tell him, but because I needed to hear the voice of someone who knew me. I didn't say much. I asked about the kids. He asked me how I had slept. I told him I slept fine, even though it was a lie. We talked for 20 minutes about absolutely nothing that mattered. In those 20 minutes of meaningless conversation, I found a good enough reason to make it to the next day. Just that. You don't need more than that most days. Just one good enough reason to make it to the next one. You don't have to figure out the grand meaning of your life. You don't have to solve any massive problems or make any final decisions. You just have to find one reason for tomorrow. Just one. Whichever one happens to be available to you at this exact moment in your life. I spent the next few months learning how to live in a house that suddenly had way too much silence. I'm not going to tell you it was easy because that would be a lie. And like I said, at this point, I don't have the time left for lies big or small. It was brutal. There are days even now, 11 years later, when I miss her with an intensity I never expected to keep feeling. Moments when I put a record on after dinner like we used to do together, and the silence where she isn't sitting is louder than any song. Mornings when I still accidentally set out 2 mugs. But every single day I found something. Some days it was the balcony. Other days it was a phone call to the grandkids. Other days it was simply waiting around until 4 o'clock to watch the light hit that window, which is such a tiny thing, it almost feels embarrassing to say out loud. But it has been enough so many times when nothing bigger was available. There is something I want to say right now about loneliness. Something almost nobody talks about because it doesn't sound pretty, but it remains one of the most solid truths I know after 106 years of watching how humans operate. Loneliness isn't just sadness. It isn't just an emotional state you can manage with enough willpower or the right habits. Loneliness is a concrete, physical weight that settles into your body, the exact same way the winter cold settles into your bones. The body registers it, hoards it, tallies it up, and it eats your time. That weight collects a toll that no diet in the world can pay off. The years of my life where I had someone to truly talk to, someone who asked me how I was doing and actually waited for the real answer. Someone for whom my presence meant something solid in the world. Those were better years in every possible sense than the years I've spent alone with my healthy habits and my perfectly watered geraniums. That's not something I read in a book somewhere. It's something I've tested on my own skin for decades. Having people around people who are waiting for you, people to whom you matter in some way, isn't some sentimental luxury. It's not a weakness, and it's not just an old man's complaint. It is a structural part of what keeps you alive, as real and necessary as water or oxygen. My kids don't come around much, and I get it. I don't hold it against them. They have their own lives, their jobs, their own problems, their own fears. The distances are long. Time is always chewed up by something. But a few months ago, after Charlie told me on the phone that he really wanted to come visit, but work was impossible right now, and that as soon as things calmed down a bit, he would definitely make the trip, I told him exactly what I needed to tell him. I said, "Charlie, I am 106 years old. I'm not asking you to move in here or drive up every weekend. I'm telling you that if you wait for things to calm down to come see me, there's a very real chance that by the time you get here, we won't be having this conversation. Things don't calm down. That is something you learn as you get older. Things never calm down. They just get replaced by other things. There is always something. If you wait for there to be nothing, you'll be waiting forever. He came that weekend. He caught the train Friday night and stayed here until Sunday. We sat out on this balcony both afternoons with our coffee. No rush, no phones in the way. He told me things he'd been holding on to for years that I never knew. I told him things I should have told him when he was 40, and I still had the energy and the clarity to say them right. We both cried a little, which isn't all that strange between a father and a son, if enough time has passed without them actually talking. Now he calls every week, every single week without fail. And that thing which seems so small is actually everything. There is a question I've been asking myself for a long time, one I never quite finish answering, even though every passing year gives me a slightly clearer picture. The question is this: what exactly has kept me here all this time? And the honest answer, the only one I can give without lying to myself, has a few layers. The first layer is the one I already told you about: purpose. Having something to look forward to tomorrow. A concrete reason, no matter how small, as long as it's real and it's yours. Without that, the body simply finds no logical reason to keep up the effort of standing upright. I've seen it too many times to have any doubts about it. The second layer is the one nobody says out loud because it sounds like surrendering to blind luck. My father made it to 88, my mother to 91. The body I was born into had a built-in durability that I didn't earn. They left it to me without even knowing they were leaving it. I could sit here and tell you that my longevity is all about discipline, willpower, good habits, and smart choices made at the right time. It would sound fantastic, but it would be a half-truth. And half-truths are the worst kind of lies because they carry just enough truth to make you believe them, so you stop digging for the rest. The third layer, and this is the one that took me the longest to figure out how to describe properly, is something that has to do with the relationship a person has with time. For many years of my life, I lived steps ahead of myself, always waiting for something to finish so the good part could start, waiting for the kids to grow up, waiting for the biggest job site to wrap up, waiting for work to slow down a little, waiting to have more time, more money, more peace, more clarity, waiting for the perfect moment to arrive. The perfect moment to do the things I actually wanted to do. To tell Ruth what I really thought. To take the kids to that place I promised I'd take them. To call that buddy I hadn't spoken to in months, because there was always something more urgent blocking the road. The perfect moment didn't show up on its own. What showed up was just time passing, which is the only trick time knows how to do. And me right there with it, waiting. In my 80s, I finally understood something I wished to God I had understood in my 40s. And it's this: the right moment doesn't arrive. You are the one who decides that this moment, the one you are holding in your hands right now, is good enough to be completely inside of. Not halfway, not with one eye on what's missing. Completely inside of it. And when I started doing that, when I stopped preparing to live and finally just started living, something shifted in my body. I don't know how to explain this without sounding like a cheap self-help book, because it isn't one. It is a concrete observation I have made about my own machinery over decades. When you are present in the day you're standing in, the body responds in a way it simply doesn't when you are living in the day you're hoping for. It is a physical difference, not just an emotional one. The body knows when it's in the right place. Now there is one last thing I want to say before I wrap this up. And it's the hardest one to admit because it means owning up to something I refused to see for a very long time. For years after I retired, I dedicated myself to occupying time, to filling it up, to making sure the day was always packed with something, activities, obligations, things to get done. I believed that was the same thing as having a purpose. I thought that if the day was full, it meant I was making the most of it. But it is not the same thing. There is a massive difference between occupying time and inhabiting time. Occupying time is shoving things into your day so there are no empty gaps. Inhabiting time is being so deep inside what you are doing that time isn't just something passing by while you do a task, but something that is happening with you and within you. I figured it out late. A lot later than I would have liked, but I figured it out. And what has kept me here, what has given me something that feels a whole lot like peace when I sit in this chair and look out that window and think about everything that has gone down, isn't that I occupied my time. It's that I inhabited enough real, true moments over all these years. With Ruth, with the kids when they were little, and the world seemed massive to them, and I was the most important guy in that world. With the crew on those freezing winter mornings when the coffee poured out of the thermos boiling hot, and the sun hadn't even cracked the horizon yet. With my buddies at those Thursday card games that always went on longer than we planned. With the geraniums on the balcony at 9 in the morning when the dew was still clinging to the leaves. Inhabited moments. That is what stays. That is what actually counts. Not the plans you made, not the ones you executed. The moments you were truly inside of. This morning I got up at 6, just like always. I put the coffee on, just like always. I stepped out onto the balcony for a minute. I can't bend down like I used to anymore, or kneel in the dirt the way I knelt 20 years ago. But I can still look. I can still feel the morning air before the day heats up. I can still check if the plants are doing all right, or if they need something. I put on one of the old records, the ones Ruth used to play when she cooked, which was when she was the happiest. I sat down in this chair. I looked at the chair across from me that has been empty for 11 years. And I said, "Good morning," just like I do every single morning since she left. That's what there is. That is my life at 106 years old. It isn't dramatic and it isn't spectacular. It is not the life of a guy who uncovered some mystic secret nobody else knows. It is the life of a man who learned a few important things a little too late and who is willing to say them out loud, just in case they help someone who still has time to do something with them. Eat well. Yeah, of course, eat well. Move your body every day, even if it's just a little, even if it's just down to the corner and back. Get the sleep you need. Take care of yourself. All of that matters, and it would be a lie to tell you it doesn't. But above all else, find yourself a reason for tomorrow. Just one. Make it small. Make it whatever is available to you at this exact second of your life. A balcony, a phone call, a game of cards, a book, the light hitting a window at a specific hour. Something that ensures tomorrow isn't just the day you haven't died yet, but the day you have something to do, something to look forward to, something that needs you, even just a little bit. And call whoever you need to call. Go see whoever you need to see. Tell whoever you need to tell that thing you've been holding on to. Don't wait for the circumstances to be perfect, because the circumstances are never perfect. And while you're waiting for them, time just keeps running in one single direction. Don't spend your life preparing to live it. That is my biggest regret. The thing I did for entirely too many years. Waiting to have more time, more money, more peace, more clarity. Waiting for the kids to grow up, for the job to ease up, for the right moment to arrive. The right moment doesn't show up on its own. You are the one who decides that this moment, this exact one you have right now, is good enough to be completely inside of. I've spent 106 years inside my life with all the good and all the brutal that comes with it. With the losses, with the mistakes, with the things I built right and the things I tore down. with the years of fullness and the years of sheer emptiness. With Ruth by my side for 58 years, and with her empty chair staring back at me for the last 11. And this afternoon when the light comes through that window at 4 o'clock sharp, just like it does every single day, I will be right here watching it. That is what I have. And as it turns out, that is enough. Educational disclaimer. The following commentary and the narrative referenced are presented strictly for educational, informational, and inspirational purposes. This content reflects personal philosophical interpretations of life, connection, and longevity, and it should never be construed as professional, medical, psychological, or lifestyle advice. When we look at someone who has reached the incredible age of 106, our immediate instinct is to search for a formula, a magic checklist of diet and exercise that we can copy to outrun our own mortality. Arthur's story beautifully shatters this illusion by reminding us that a meaningful life cannot be reduced to a mechanical cookbook recipe. He willingly shared his honest daily list of scrambled eggs, real meat, seasonal vegetables, and a Sunday glass of wine. But he quickly pointed out that focusing solely on these physical ingredients completely misses the grander point of our existence. We so often find ourselves trapped like his neighbor Gordon, who spent decades meticulously recording his vitals and managing his cholesterol, only to spend his final years paralyzed by the constant fear of dying, rather than actually participating in the life right in front of him. There is a profound, life-altering difference between merely avoiding death and actively choosing to live. True longevity, as Arthur discovered through his 41 years of bricklaying and his subsequent decades of retirement, is anchored in having a concrete reason to open your eyes every single morning. When the sudden emptiness of retirement threatened to shut his body down, it was the simple, quiet act of watering the geraniums on his balcony that pulled him back from the edge. This teaches us that human beings require purpose, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant it might appear to the outside world. Whether it is tending to a plant, watching the golden winter light hit a window pane at 4 in the afternoon, or listening to an old record, these tiny anchors give our days a distinct shape. Arthur also forces us to confront the heavy physical reality of loneliness, describing it as a literal weight that settles deep into our bones and drains our remaining time. His poignant, urgent conversation with his son Charlie serves as a necessary wake-up call for all of us who constantly postpone human connection under the guise of being too busy. He wisely warned his son that things never truly calm down. They just get replaced by other obligations. And if we wait for the perfect moment to see the people we love, we will be waiting forever. Ultimately, the deepest humanistic wisdom Arthur leaves us with is the vital distinction between occupying time and inhabiting time. To occupy time is simply to shove endless activities into our schedules to outrun the silence. Whereas, to inhabit time is to be completely present within the current hour, fully feeling the warmth of our choices and accepting both the beautiful and the brutal aspects of our journey. From my perspective, Arthur's remarkable journey serves as a profound mirror reflecting our modern obsession with optimizing existence at the expense of actually experiencing it. We live in an anxious era where we constantly measure our steps, sleep cycles, and caloric intake, yet we frequently forget to measure the depth of our daily joy. This narrative gently reminds us that a human heart does not keep beating merely because it is well fed, but because it has a meaningful destination to reach tomorrow morning. I believe the true tragedy of human life is not that it inevitably ends, but that we often delay our happiness while waiting for a flawless future that does not exist. We treat our finite time like a resource to be aggressively spent or hoarded, rather than a sacred canvas where every ordinary moment possesses its own quiet dignity. By embracing the simple acts of everyday care, like tending to a flower or making a warm phone call, we actively resist the crushing weight of isolation. True humanistic value lies in recognizing that our vulnerability is not a clinical weakness to be cured, but the very thread that connects us deeply to one another. When we choose to step out of our deep-seated fears and step into the present, we open our lives to profound substance and beautiful texture. It is incredibly vital to understand that we do not need a grand, world-changing mission to justify our place on this earth. A good life can be constructed entirely out of tiny, inhabited moments that bring us closer to ourselves and those we cherish. We must learn to brave the silence of our own empty spaces and transform them into sanctuaries of reflection and deep gratitude. Let us stop treating our loved ones as items on a future checklist and start showing up for them with absolute intentionality today. By shifting our primary focus from merely surviving to truly belonging to the current hour, we heal the subtle fractures within our souls. Ultimately, the richness of our human legacy is determined not by the years we accumulate, but by the love we courageously share along the way. May we all find the internal bravery to stop preparing to live, and finally have the courage to just start living right now.